Good evening, ladies and Mark.
Ladies and Mark.
I'm Tom Perry, and I'm here because I live with the woman who opened the museum up for y'all tonight, so I had to take her to dinner, and so here I am. I thought I would do something for Halloween. We'll have a whatever witch story. How's that for Wednesday? How's
I
that?
like it.
All right, I got this from the Patrick County Heritage book. It's a story about the Ahart Ridge. We're writing a book about this, which hopefully I'll have out one of these days. So this takes place in Patrick County, the hollow known as Airy, happened about 200 years ago, or so they say. At the Robert Clark Place, which is now State Road 676, which is, if you know Willis Gap, is the East Fork Road, the Ahart Ridge Road, it's bold, lived a woman named Granny Scott. And Granny, for some reasons only known to herself, had a great desire to become a witch. She had heard of a plan which might make this possible. And one day she's walking through the pasture of the Clark Place and she sees Mr. Clark sitting up on top of this rock. And he tells her how she can become a witch, gives her a spell and everything. And as she walks off, Mr. Clark transforms into Lucifer himself. And forever it is known as the Devil's Chair. In order to become a true witch, one should go to a spring and drink from a silver cup, repeating the incantations all the while he had given her. The procedure is repeated for 9 days in succession. Old Granny was overjoyed. She promptly got a silver cup and headed out to the spring at the Clark Place, which was later purchased by Ty Montgomery. This spring was chosen due to the fact that it ran northward. It went the wrong way. For 9 days, she took 9 sips from the silver cup and prayed long and hard to become a witch. And on the 9th day, old Granny Scott became a witch. And she was so happy that she changed herself into an enchanted white deer. And every hunting season, she made so much noise in Clark Bottom that all the hunters were out to shoot her, to shoot the strange, unusual deer. And many men skilled at the art of hunting shot the deer with no effect whatsoever. Jake Hart, I don't know what I'm doing, I just had to put that
You're
in.
perfect. Keep going.
Jake Ahart was a young man living in the Henry High house just 2 miles away from the Clark Place, and Jake was a man of the forest and loved to hunt above all things. And Jake was much intrigued and all about the mysterious exotic deer, and he made his mind up that next hunting season he was going to kill that deer no matter what. He went out and had a silver bullet made so he could use it on the deer. And much care and time was put into making the special silver bullet, and it met with the approval of Jake. Summer passed, and the last fall season was in full swing, and old Granny Scott again changed herself into the beautiful white deer and noisily played in the Clark Bottom. And early one frosty morning, Jake decided that it was his day to kill the deer once and for all. And he took his gun loaded with the silver bullet. Sounds like a Stephen King story, doesn't it? And made his way down to Johnson's Creek, and he traveled through the thick, creepy vines and the underbrush, eventually arriving at the Clark Place. He chose his vantage point well. Presently, his sharp eye detected the renowned deer standing under a horse apple tree. And Jake watched the deer for a few seconds, and then he aimed his gun, and the silver bullet found its mark. The deer fell silently beneath the apple tree. Jake ran swiftly across the bottom to the tree to claim his much prized kill, and he found not a deer, but old Granny Scott, crumpled under the apple tree, badly wounded from the silver bullet. For days, Granny Scott remained seriously ill in a condition from the wound made by the silver bullet. She pulled a silk scarf through the wound for 9 times, as this was supposed to cure wounds made from a silver bullet. And all this was to no avail. Thus she remained ill, and during the illness, old Granny filled Jake with remorse. And he went to visit her, taking his small son with him. And Granny Scott drew the small boy to her bedside and presented him with a gift of a small black dog. And Jake let his son accept the dog, not realizing the animal had been bewitched by old Granny Scott. And on the 9th day after being shot with a silver bullet, old Granny departed this earth in the form of a very old woman, leaving behind her bewitched dog with the Ahart boy. And the body of old Granny Scott was buried on a ridge of the farm that belonged to Peter Bondurant at the same time. The farm was later bought by Muncie Bowman, and go by his house, where his house was today, one of his descendants has this sign. It's got a man pulling back a bow on the sign. After a period of time, the talk of old Granny Scott ceased in the hollow, where once again it was peaceful. Another hunting season came, and to the surprise of all the hunters in the area, there was once again a deer of unusual beauty and swiftness that could not be killed with ordinary bullets. Jake had Jim Ayers make him another silver bullet, and as he planned to be the man to kill this deer, Jake left his small son at home and set out with his gun and the silver bullet. He advanced through the hilly terrain surrounding the Henry Hyatt house until he came to a clearing in the forest near George Montgomery's house. The Henry Hyatt house was now owned by Curtis Gwynn. And when he saw the deer, Jake carefully aimed the gun, and the silver bullet completely penetrated the deer, and it lodged in a nearby oak tree. The deer suddenly changed into Jake's son before his horrified eyes. He buried his son in the Gwynn graveyard, and many years later, upon hearing the story, four of the Gwynn boys, Joe, Ed, Daniel, and Floyd, and I actually knew some of these guys, believed that maybe the animal had been buried there instead of a human, and while their mother was visiting Mount Airy, they dug up the grave, and the fact they discovered human bones, not a deer. And as a result of the escapades, the boys were given a, quote, beating to last a lifetime. They had to put the bones back in the grave and refill it, and Floyd kept out a piece of the casket and carried it in his pocket for the remainder of his life. A few years later, they were cutting the trees down in the Henry Hyatt place or construct a log barn for one of the Bowman boys, and one of the trees cut had a silver bullet in it. And when the tree was placed in the barn, at the end of the log, it had the shape of a deer's head. And no matter how the log was cut or placed, you could always see that deer's head. And the barn has since been torn down, but the logs still remain at the bottom, near where the devil's chair still is, where it said, old Granny Scott had come to commune with old Lucifer himself. Many facts and much evidence remain to substantiate this incident. The ridge on the Henry Hyatt farm continues to be a mysterious place. People have seen and heard creatures and objects in the white sandy level or located otherwise in the red clay in the hilly terrain of State Road 676, which now bisects the Montgomery home, which is owned by Imogene Brown. Does Patrick County still have old Granny Scott as a witch? Is she in fact dead in the dust on the old Muncie farm, or is she peacefully resting for a period, waiting for a continuous time to romp and roam the hills of Patrick County again, spreading her mischief and fear among the citizens? Before you dismiss this as just another witch tale, be sure to look closely at your dog, because he could be ascendant of that dog from Jake Ahart, and he might bewitch you too.
Wow.